Somehow we're nearing the end of November, and I don't know where the time has gone, but we're going to get you ready for some upcoming Pokemon tournaments. Hey, Nick from 9Card TCG, and today we're going to be talking about some of the most popular and best decks in the current meta, what you can look forward to playing, or maybe what you should be playing in the month of December. I took a little bit of a break, maybe like the weekend or so off, because Scarlet and Violet just came out, at least at the time of recording, and I've been playing like crazy. The game is so good. I've been having a ton of fun. If you are as well, I don't blame you for not really playing the TCG as much, but we're going to talk TCG today because that's what we're here to do. And before we go into it any further, if we haven't gone into it at all, we haven't done anything. Like, subscribe, comment, all that kind of stuff tells YouTube this is a good channel. Other people should watch it. We're going to head over to both Limitless and Trainer Hill to take a look at not only what decks are really popular, but how they do against one another. So first, we are at play.limitless TCG, and I have all the links in the video description if you want to check it out, see these for yourself. They're there, and really this is just to kind of show you the top 10 decks in terms of what's being played, not necessarily what's the best, right? But obviously Lugia Archeops, being the big new deck from Silver Tempest, is gonna have the biggest meta share at about 17%, and it's winning almost 54% of the time, so that's a pretty good win percent. Mew, not really surprising. Forest Seal Stone, really good. Everyone already has the cards for Mew. The League Battle decks are out, so like there's a bunch of things going for Mew. Just under 50% win rate, which is it makes me excited, but it's a little weird to see Mew not winning as much as maybe it should. Lost Box, Regis, Giratina, Arceus Duraludon. We're going to skip other because it's other, even though it's being played. You can see the win percent is really, really low, so I don't really care too much about it, so we're just going to skip it. Vikavolt Regieleki, Palkia Inteleon, and we're going to go into Hisuian Zoroark, which is number 11. So you can see the various win percents for these decks. The highest one, I believe, is Arceus Duraludon with 54%. And then the lowest in this category is Hisuian Zoroark with not even 43% win. I'm not surprised. It's not that good of a deck. It is, but just not right now. So these are the decks we're going to focus on when we take a look at matchup data at Trainer Hill. So let's go do that right now. Trainer Hill lets us see matchup data from decks played in online tournaments and stuff. And I want to make a couple of quick disclaimers. I probably should have done this before, but whatever. One, these are online tournaments, whatever. Number one. Number two, matchup data on its own is not the be-all end-all of how a deck is going to do or how good a deck is. Obviously, you want to have a deck that has really good matchups into the most popular things in the format. But just because if we pick randomly Hisuian Zoroark against Lugia, it wins only 20% of the time, roughly, so 1 out of every 5 games. You could be that 1 in 5 games, right? Just because you're going against Lugia, if you're playing Hisuian Zoroark, doesn't mean you are going to lose. It just, in the 29 games that have been played, most of those went the way of Lugia. So, keep all this with a grain of salt. It's just kind of good to know. And we're going to start this off. This goes in alphabetical order, not in order of, most played or, anything like that. So, let's just start with Arceus Duraludon, right? Arceus Duraludon has a pretty positive matchup spread. Some of the things, 48%, I consider that neutral. It has a good matchup into Zoroark. It has a good matchup into Palkia, even though there's not a ton of matches being played in the Silver Tempest format. So we're just going to start off top of the list. Arceus Duraludon, 50-52 itself. 48% against Giratina Lost Box. It's very, very slightly unfavored. I would still consider this neutral. It's basically a coin flip. Hisuian Zoroark, you're gonna probably, you're slightly favored. Kyurem Palkia, you are doing pretty good against Kyurem Palkia. Now, keep in mind, this is only 8 matches played in the Silver Tempest format. If we look back to Lost Origin, these numbers will be different. So, just keep this in mind. This is after November 11th. So, anything after November 11th, and it has to have had at least 32 players. That's the filters I had on Trainer Hill where we're getting this data. So, your results may vary. Really good in the Lost Box. Right, they just don't hit you very hard, and it's really hard for them to knock you out. Lugia, 52 matches played, and you're slightly favored. Again, I would still call 52% neutral, just like I would call 48% neutral. So, just because you have an ability that prevents you from being hit by special energy, and Lugia is all special energy, there's still things like Yveltal, and Lugia can still hit Arceus, and Lugia still might play things like Path to the Peak or things like that. So, there's a lot of things that Lugia can do, and doesn't make Duraludon like the greatest matchup in the world to Lugia because of things like Yveltal. Really kind of annoying because I like Arceus Duraludon as a deck. So if we can, it's super easy to play, and it's fun to just wall things. You do take a unfavored matchup to Mew and Palkia, and you have a pretty good Regis matchup as well. So overall, I don't know how much Mew we're going. I mean, we saw it. It's number 2 in terms of popularity. However, are we going to see it in person tournaments? I'm unsure. Online is a little different because it's a little harder to get cards online sometimes. You don't want to spend real money on, all these 200 codes that you need to get, Lugia and stuff. It's a whole thing. Palkia, it makes perfect sense that you don't do super well. Just even despite having a very low bench, Palkia just put out so much damage. It's kind of annoying actually. And Regis. Giratina Lost Box, a very, very good deck. A little difficult to pilot, but really good. We already talked about Giratina. We're going to skip the ones that we already talked about. They're just the inverse. Obviously, if Arceus Duraludon is winning 48% of the time, that means Giratina's against Duraludon is going to win 52. We're just going to skip over the inverses, if you will. Really good matchup against Zoroark. I mean, 80% win rate almost. That's you are winning that matchup most likely. Neutral against Palkia, pretty neutral against Lost Box. You're losing to Lugia. You're favored against Mew. You're pretty good into Palkia, and you're pretty neutral to Regis. So Lugia is like, you don't really want to take a loss to Lugia right now just because of how popular it is. So, and that's how a lot of games played. 131 games is a pretty decent sample size. Now, of course, most online tournaments are best of 1, so that's something we do have to consider. But if you're losing if you're only winning 40% of the time, even in best of 1s, eventually that would average out. So yeah, you're probably not doing super hot against Lugia. Again, doesn't mean you can't win, but you're gonna have to really know that matchup and play it well. Zoroark, it just doesn't look super good. What do you do with your best matchup is Kyurem Palkia because it's all 2 and 3 prizers? If that was what the format was, yeah, Zoroark would be great, but even against Duraludon, you are most of the time almost all special energy, so once you get through the Arceus, you're not really going to get through the Duraludon most of the time. You take a huge loss to Lugia, Lost Box, Giratina we already talked about. You're not even beating Regis. You're neutral of Mew. Aside from Kyurem Palkia, what do you have going for you? Really, the answer is nothing, at least in this format. Maybe in the future that'll change, but I don't think so. Speaking of Kyurem Palkia, another deck that, despite being very, very popular, doesn't seemingly have a ton of positive matchups to warrant its popularity. Its best matchup, it doesn't even have a single positive matchup. I mean, but let's take a look at, before we get too hard on it, how many games is it being played? 8 matches here, 29, 7, 10, 25, 40, 51, 6, and 28. So some of these are pretty good. 50 games against Mew is a pretty decent sample size. 40 games against Lugia is pretty believable. So, you know, I would take some of this and say, okay, it's pretty valid. Kyurem Palkia into Duraludon. There's only 8 games. That could very easily have been just Kyurem bricked, Arceus popped off. Maybe the person played it poorly, whatever, you just don't know. So that's something else to take into consideration with online data, is that we don't know who's piloting these decks. So you can have something like a Zoroark, and the only people left playing it are those who really, really like Zoroark, but maybe aren't the best players in the world, or maybe just had an off night, or whatever, they're trying a new list, something like that, and it just didn't go very well. You know, that all gets lumped in here, but things that we can't, it's too difficult to dissect out without doing like an in-depth profile for a particular deck. So one of the many reasons I tell you to take all of this with a grain of salt. We're still very new into the Silver Tempest format, so things are still kind of getting figured out, but here we are. Lost Zone Box, a deck that has been doing pretty well. Your worst matchup is Duraludon. Again, you're just not hitting very hard. 110 with the Cramorant just isn't enough when you get, the Duraludon can heal 120. The Charizard can be really useful into the Duraludon, but they're just hitting so hard, 220 every single turn. And you got to go through 2 Duraludon Vmaxes and an Arceus V-Star. That's just a lot for a deck that does not put out very much damage. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. But doing super well against Palkia Inteleon, love to see it. Regis, 50-50. Mew, you're favored against, which is great. And these are some really high win matchups, or matches played. 100 games, 141 games, 184 games, and you're pretty neutral. So Lost Box has it going for it. Yeah, if you hit Duraludon, fine, you're probably going to lose. But when you're winning against Zoroark, when you're slightly favored against Giratina, you're slightly favored against Palkia. I mean, you're beating Palkia probably. You're probably going to beat Mew. You're neutral to Lugia. That's really, really good. Lost Box, something to keep an eye on for sure. And like I said, the numbers are there for most of these matchups. 85, like I said, 141. This one's only 14, so a little less power behind it statistically. I mean, it's not really the best use of the word power there, but whatever, you get the idea. The new deck everybody is playing, including myself, Lugia. I mean, come on. It's neutral pretty much to everything or better. Its best matchup is Zoroark, which what doesn't have a good matchup to Zoroark, really. It's beating Giratina, which is pretty crazy because Giratina needs 10 cards in the Lost Zone so that they can use Star Requiem and instantly knock out any one of your active Pokemon. However, Lugia can do that turn 2 with using something like Yveltal, and it's only a single prize Pokemon, not a 2-prizer, so that makes a big difference. You're slightly unfavored against Palkia Inteleon, but again, I would still call this pretty neutral. Your worst matchup is Mew. Fine. Mew is a little weird because, I guess we'll talk about it right now. Mew is a little interesting because the Forest Sealed Stone is a thing, but I think it's bugged on PTCGO and it's banned from PTCG Live. So how good is Mew really? It's kind of like Regis when, people weren't really playing Regis online because Gift Energy was bugged and you weren't seeing its full potential, so people didn't want to play it. Mew is kind of suffering from the same thing right now, so a little something to keep in mind. But because of Lugia and the Forest Seal Stone being a thing, Meloetta is making its way back into the format. So you're starting to see some more Fusion Strike energy builds as opposed to the strict double turbo energy builds that we have been seeing all throughout Lost Origin. So Meloetta Donk is a thing again, and I'm not happy about it. But what is Mew actually beating? You're beating Duraludon, okay. You're beating Kyurem Palkia, you're beating Lugia most of the time, and Lugia has one of those things, since this is Lugia is the hot new deck that people are trying to learn about. the thing about Lugia is that, or really against most of the time against Mew, if you can survive that turn 1, turn 2, you're probably going to be in a decent spot if you can set up. But if you don't, you're in a lot of trouble. And this is a lot of games, 233. So I'm kind of inclined to believe that Mew is going to win more often than it loses. But again, this could be very much coin flip based in a best of 1 format. It could be people playing a huge variety of Lugia Archeops decks that just either aren't optimized, that they're trying out, they're playing around, they're trying to figure out and learn. Mew's been around for a year now. We know how to play Mew. We do not know the best way to play Archeops yet. So some of this is, of course, subject to change. You're still beating Palkia, cool. And yeah, Mew's still not a bad pick despite the Drapion issue. You just find that Lost City, you cram for the Lost City, you Forest Seal Stone for the Lost City, you put it down, you knock out the Drapion, and now you take 2 prizes, and they gotta find a way to get through that Mew. Oh, they have to find a way to get through that Mew Vmax. Starting to wrap this up, Palkia Inteleon, what are you losing to? Lost Zone, you're losing to Mew, okay, everything else, you're losing to Giratina, probably. It's still a really good pick, right? Palkia is still very, very strong. And then, of course, Regis, your worst matchup is going to be Palkia Inteleon. Duraludon's kind of a difficult one as well, but if you can get set up before they do and knock out their Arceus, and now they just have a poor little Duraludon stranded, you might be in a pretty good spot. So I almost forgot to include Vikavolt because we took off other, and I forgot to include, I added the Zoroark, but forgot to add the Vikavolt, so we're going to go through that very, very quickly. Vikavolt losing to Duraludon makes perfect sense. They just don't do nearly enough damage, and Duraludon does not really need to play items between things like Starbirth and the very high supporter count, so that makes sense to me. Beating Giratina Lost Box, and you're probably beating Lost Zone Box very, very efficiently. They are both very item heavy decks, so Vikavolt being able to paralyze and bolt and make sure your opponent can't play items is obviously a very good thing. You're beating Palkia Inteleon because you hit for weakness between the Vikavolt and the Regieleki Vmax, boosting your Vikavolt attack, and you hit for weakness. And they also can't play items, a deck that really wants to play Capacious Buckets and Quick Balls to get energy into the discard so they can Star Portal, and Quick Ball for a, a Radiant Greninja so they can discard an energy and draw, and now they can have, when they Star Portal, they get even more energy. Like, it's very combo heavy. Scoop up nets onto the Inteleon engine. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. You're losing the Regis because the Regirock is going to wreck you. That makes a ton of sense. You're also probably going to lose to Lugia despite being weak to Lightning. You're losing to Lugia because Dunsparce is a thing, and also once they get those Archeops into the discard, they don't really need items a ton because you're accelerating so many energies through Archeops, and then you play a Marnie or Research or Serena, you're probably going to find the things you need. And I mean, again, outside of something like, I don't even know what you would want. Once you get the Archeops into the discard, you get Lugia in play, you're kind of golden, you're set, and you're just going to hit really, really hard. Again, they have a bunch of juicy Vmaxes in play. They're going to have at least one Vmax in play so they can do more damage. You just boss that up, Serena it up, and then you use Yveltal to take 3 very easy prizes. I mean, come on. You can use Charizard to knock out a, what's-his-face, a Vikavolt. Even if it has a Cape of Toughness, Charizard just one-hits it. And that's 2 single-prize Pokemon taking 5 prizes in 2 attacks. I mean, and you don't even have to use the Lugia if you don't want to, probably. And even if they try to boss trap something, they try to like gust something into the active and leave it there, whatever, just paralyzing bolt, chip damage, you can't play items, you're still going to be able to accelerate energies with Archeops to the active so you can retreat and attack with whatever you want. So yeah, you're losing to Zoroark again. You were all 2-3 prize Pokemon thing. Zoroark excels at beating. And that's, yeah, now that is actually everything. So if I was to go to a tournament tomorrow, what would I play? The answer is Lugia. I think Lugia is absolutely incredible. I think it's super fast, super strong, and there's just so much you can do with it. You know, you could be a single prize, partially single prize deck attacking with your Veltal, Raikou, Charizard. You can attack with your Archeops if you want. It's still an option. You can still hit for 120 to 160 with something like an Archeops if you really, really want to. And then you do have your tanky Lugias. V-Guard Energy gives you 310 health. You throw a Radiant Gardevoir in there. You got 330 health on a 2-prize Pokemon. It's insane. So that's just me. And because in-person tournaments are closed list, you can bring any Lugia deck and completely surprise your opponent, because Lugia and Archeops can accelerate literally any special energy in the game, so I guarantee you there's going to be a special energy to suit an attacker you want to use. So that's what I would bring. After that, me personally, I would bring a Lost Box style deck, because I love Lost Urshifu. I think it's super, super strong, super good. There's not a lot of snipe in the format, so people might not be playing as many Manaphies, so you might have to worry about that as much. But Radiant Greninja is still a thing. You know, the Regieleki in the single prize deck does have some snipe capability, so don't be surprised if you see some Manaphy, especially from things like Lost Zone decks, where if you just attack their bench, they're done. You also might see some Manaphies because of Amazing Rare Raikou in Lugia deck, so that is also a thing that I forgot about. And then my third option, crazy as it is going to be Arceus Duraludon, because I think it's a very strong deck. Outside of the Mew and Palkia, you're probably going to be doing just fine. And it's a pretty easy deck to play. You don't have to like burn yourself out in thought trying to figure out what the best line is and the sequencing, whatever. It's just like you just throw your cards down and play for the most part. But those are the three: Lugia, Lost Zone, and Arceus Duraludon. But I want to know what you would play to a tournament, and you know, if you're not comfortable telling us what you're going to play in a tournament, that's totally fine. Just let me know which deck you dislike playing against the most. But yeah, that's why don't we wrap this up. That's gonna do it for us today. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Found it informative. If you did, like, subscribe, comment. I already said that at the beginning, but I like to say it here at the end again, because I like to repeat myself. Trainer Hill, Play.Limitless, links, video description. Again, said that at the beginning too. I'm really repeating myself today. And what are we we're just gonna go. We're gonna wrap this up. Thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.